everything good? Okay. All right, we got all our tech set up, so we're ready to go. Thanks for all your help setting up. So hi everybody, how's it going? My name is Francesca. I'm really excited to be here. I know a lot of you who are here. I see a lot of familiar faces. I kind of started my game dev career in Boston, and about 2 years ago I had to move away, so it's always really fun to come back and see everybody. And actually the first Boston Festival of Indie Games talks was the first time I ever did any sort of like big public speaking. So yeah, I'm just like really excited to be back and like sharing all these new things I've learned over the years with you. Everything works, awesome. So hi, my name is Francesca. I am the president and co-founder of Contigo Games. It's an independent game studio which is centered around the idea of developing cooperative multiplayer games with the purpose of bringing players together with positive experiences. I also work with Girls Make Games as an ambassador and instructor. So Girls Make Games is a great organization. They run summer camps and workshops for around middle school aged girls to introduce them to game development, coding, and technology. The other thing I do is I am also, and this is the reason I had to move away, is that I am currently a graduate student at New York University at the Game Center. So right now I'm in my last semester. I am frantically working on my thesis and will be graduating in May. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you. I haven't done it yet, so don't clap for me yet. So these are some of my current projects. Oh, that photo's a little dark, but I'll explain what you're seeing here. So top left is a project I'm working on called Hellcouch. It is a game, the previous talk was talking a lot about butts, not in this context, but this is actually a game that you play with your butt. So the idea is that the couch is possessed and you have to hop around and like push the cushion buttons with your butt in order to exercise the couch and release the demon. It's a lot of fun. We've already broken our couch once just from enthusiastic playtesters, like hopping around. Up over there is a game I'm working on called Chroma. It's a tabletop game about color blending. So it's like a territory capture game, but you do it by blending different colors. And this is the game I'm working on with Contigo Games, StarCrossed. So it is a cooperative multiplayer like action arcade game about magical girls in space. And if you're interested in checking that out, we just got Steam this month, so you can wishlist it, which I'm really excited about. And then also, if you're headed to GDC, Hellcouch is going to be in the alt control area if you want to actually give your butt some exercise. Cool. Okay, so this talk is about intimacy games. So intimacy games it's kind of a new concept or like a new emerging genre in games. So it's kind of loosely defined. So in this talk, I'm going to tell you a little bit about like what my definition is and like my experience with intimacy games, and also like where I think the genre is going in the future. Cool. So here are just some quick little like really breaking it down, like basically what is an intimacy game. So intimacy games are games which are designed with an emotion-first ideology, which encourages intimate connection between player and player, or usually like player and game also. Intimacy games further a player's understanding of their companion, opponent, or situation through the gameplay. Intimacy games are also sometimes referred to as date games, meaning a multiplayer game that fosters positive emotions towards your gameplay partner. So basically this comes down to like an easy to learn party game that elicits more like connection and cooperation between the people who are playing. So perfect for, awkward dates if you need to break that awkwardness. An important thing to note is even though like they're sometimes called date games, intimacy games don't usually have romantic themes. Usually that's just because romance between the player characters, if that doesn't match the relationship of the players, it can feel kind of awkward. If your characters are like smooching on the screen and you're like, hello person I just met who's sitting next to me. So usually it's not explicitly like romantic themes in the game. So here are two examples of games that I would consider to be intimacy games, just so we can keep them in mind as we go a little further into like design principles. So the one on the left you might be familiar with. So that's Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time. It's a space shooter video game for up to 4 players developed by Asteroid Base. In this game, each player is their own individual character, but they all have to work together to pilot a spaceship through deep space and through all these obstacles and crazy enemies. So the ship has multiple components, so like someone has to steer, someone has to operate each weapon, someone has to operate the shields, but the players have to work together basically as like one entity in order to pilot the ship. And the other one on the right, this is a smaller indie game that has been shown at some conferences recently. This game is called Pillow Talk, so it's a game by Brianna Shuttleworth, who's a friend of mine, so I found out about it. But Pillow Talk explores communication, external stresses, and past romances with your current partner. The game is a zone capture strategy game where the 2 players compete for the most captured area on the pillow that is placed between them. So they capture space by asking and responding to questions about their relationship. And during the game, this is like one of the very specified rules is that the players have to maintain physical contact with one another while they're playing. Usually they choose to hold hands. So what this does is by like forcing this physical contact, it automatically becomes slightly more intimate and the players become slightly more connected. I wrote a lot of notes for this slide. Okay, so now we're gonna go over elaborating a little more on design principles, or if we want to go about designing an intimacy game, how do we get started doing that and what are our sort of goals with our design? So the game has constructive verbs and goals. So when I say verbs, I think that's something that game designers hear a lot, but it's not really like a common terminology. But so when I say verbs, I mean like the actions that the player is able to take during gameplay. So when I think about intimacy games, I think about verbs like communicate, observe, listen and respond, collect, build, touch, nurture, grow. These sort of like positive, constructive verbs. And like as an exercise, you can think about the verbs of the games that you enjoy and the games that you're playing. And I think the most interesting games that I've played usually have a mixture of positive and sort of negative or like constructive and destructive verbs that the player is doing. Intimacy games should focus on constructive verbs in the gameplay. The other thing is the player should adjust their gameplay to accommodate another player or input. So this is why a lot of intimacy games are multiplayer. So another way to say this is that your game does not revolve around the player, the one player. So it's not about exerting dominance or controlling a situation. So it's not like a power fantasy game. So the gameplay involves negotiation as you're going through it. The next thing is that gameplay is significantly enriched by collaboration, or collaboration is absolutely required to play it. This again reinforces the previous point about gameplay as negotiation. I think that's really important. So some ways to do this, which we saw in previous examples, include like the embodiment of multiple players as one entity, so Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time. Or if they're even playing, like there's examples of them playing character or players playing as like one character even. So that's always really interesting also. So Pillow Talk incorporates the physical contact between players to encourage empathy and intimacy from the get-go. So I became interested in learning more about and educating other people and sort of exploring intimacy games because about a year ago someone told me that I had made one and I was like, I don't know what that is, how could I make one? But I realized that StarCrossed is an intimacy game. So in StarCrossed, 2 players are working together collaboratively to take out enemies. So they not only have a unified goal, but the main mechanic of the game actively involves both parties. So here you'll see that like instead of a normal sort of like action arcade shooter where you're shooting a projectile, your projectile bounces back and forth between you. So it's entirely about positioning and relationship to your partner. So players have to keep track of their partner's position so that they can line up shots together. If the pair is aiming for different targets or not communicating with one another, it's really hard to get anything done. Awareness of your partner and their play style is important to your joint success. Also, StarCrossed general theming and narrative adds to this sort of idea that it's an intimacy game. So it's about partnership and sort of the characters learning to understand one another as they go through gameplay. And then I realized, oh, wait, so if this is an intimacy game, I think a lot of the things I make could actually be categorized as intimacy games. So here's a little example of like Hellcouch gameplay. And even though like, so Hellcouch isn't about, it's a very physical game. And even though we never like force the players to like hold hands or like touch physically in any way, the entire design around it is that you're sharing space with somebody else. And when we were designing this, we were thinking about like, we started with a couch and we researched like how do people share space on a couch? Or like how you share that space, how does that signify what like sort of the level of intimacy is with your relationship, right? Are you sitting really close to each other? Usually people sit on like opposite ends of the couch, right? And if someone sits really close to you, it's like kind of weird, like why are you sitting so close to me? So that was sort of the principle that we were designing around and playing with for this game. So a question, do intimacy games have to be multiplayer? No, I don't think they do. They can also be about not connecting with another player, but connecting with a community, connecting with yourself, or connecting with the world, earth, environment. But I also think that this could be considered cozy games, which is another sort of emerging genre, which I see as like a sub-genre of intimacy games. So cozy games also involve positive verbs, but they tend to focus more on comfortable and slow single-player experiences. So these are just some examples. So the one on the left is hashtag self-care, which is a mobile app about doing like calming and meditative exercises. The middle one is Viridi, which is a game where you just grow succulents over time, and it's really nice and like relaxing. And I would also consider like Happy Home Designer, like a game that's very focused on like manipulating your environment for like aesthetics and like just making it pretty and comfortable. I would also consider that to be like an intimate, cozy game. So the other question is that do intimacy games have to be cooperative? And I also think that this could also be no. And I'm gonna make an argument for why fighting games are actually intimacy games. So when I first learned about intimacy games, it was through a friend of mine named Jason Lee, who he gave this talk about how fighting games are actually the purest form of intimacy game. And I think as I'm like further exploring this genre, I kind of agree with him. So though it seems kind of contradictory, fighting games are a genre in which to be good at them, the player has to have a really deep understanding of their opponent. To the point where you can basically predict what they're about to do next so that you can react to it like within that frame that they do that action. So when we talk about gameplay as negotiation, I think fighting games are a top example of adjusting your own playstyle and actions to account for your opponent. And though the goal of the game isn't collaborative and the verbs are a little more negative, right, like kill, when you break it down, like the experience and the gameplay definitely becomes a collaborative thing that you're building together. So a fighting game is like, it's only this experience between these two characters. Their focus is only on each other, and the player's goal of winning can only be accomplished because of the other player's presence. So I think that's pretty dang intimate. And I also think that's why, I'm not involved in like fighting games myself really, but from everyone I've spoken to who's involved in that community, it's really, really tight-knit and everyone knows each other very, very well because you're doing these very like intimate play sessions with one another. So, and if you want to check out some of Jason's work, his Twitter is right there. So to wrap it up, so intimacy games I think are important because they're about people, emotions, and positive experiences. When players have strong emotional reactions within a gameplay experience, they're more likely to find that experience memorable. And I hope that we all want to make memorable games. I think that's one of my goals. So I encourage you to try designing with this emotion-first approach the next time you start designing an experience for a player. So what do you want your players to feel, and how will the mechanics, narrative, and theming achieve that? So not only for intimacy games, but any sort of game that you're making. focusing on this emotion-first approach and then designing as a path to reaching that experience for your player. That's all I've got. Thank you. So I think we have like 10 minutes till the next session if anyone has questions or comments or wants to just chat about stuff. Yeah.